Hello, friends. Welcome to Minority Trip Report. MTR is a podcast for underrepresented views and life journeys with mental health, psychedelics, and consciousness. I'm your host, Raj. Today, my guest is Raad Ahmed. Raad Ahmed is the founder and CEO of Law Trades, angel investor, writer, and musician. In 2011, while attending law school, Raad started My FB Cover Photo, one of the first apps in the Facebook App Store that grew to over 30 million hits per month. In 2015, he got into the 500 Global Flagship Accelerator program and launched Law Trades, one of the first marketplaces for legal services that made it easy for big companies to hire legal freelancers. The company has gone to raise $9.7 million in total funding, and freelancers earn millions on the platform every year. In 2019, he started publishing a newsletter called Space Call. Raad is originally from Queens, New York, and is a graduate from the University at Buffalo Law School. Raad, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Super excited to be here.
Well, obviously, I have to start at the most obvious place, which is you're also Raad. And I was making this joke when we first opened up. It's like the Spider-Man meme where like one Spider-Man is found in the other. So this is going to be an interesting sort of take as we figure out how to refer to each other. Raad is also good. Let's confuse the audience a little bit.
No, it's great. I've never met another Raad before, and especially spelled in the way that most people mispronounce it and just say Rad. So super rad to be here and meet another Raad, and yeah, it's pretty hilarious.
It's funny because I know you were also in a band and you still play music. Back in the day when I was in Bangladesh and I had my first real band, it wasn't like one of those joke bands. We spent like years looking for a second guitarist, right? Somebody who's actually better than I was because I wasn't very good. And then we landed up on the guy. I remember like the front man came to my house and go like, I found the person. I found exactly the person we did. I'm like, all right, dope. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And of course he goes like, yeah, guess what his name is? It's like Raad.
No way.
I'm like, another Raad. Yeah, not joking. His name was Raad Hussein.
That is so weird.
Not only that, he had the same guitar, the digital processor that we used back in the day.
Oh my God.
The only difference was he had a head full of hair. And it seems to be the pattern here. I'm
do
the only
have
bald Raad
long
you knows. Because you have a wonderful, yes.
A head of hair while it's still there. Well, it was funny because I think like on Twitter, you tweeted at one of our investors and then he tweeted something back like, I back every Raad, like, or something like that. And then there were like 3 other Raads tagged to it. I'm just like, oh my God. Like I went from like spending the first 34 years of my life not meeting another Raad. And then all of a sudden it's just like all these Raads are out there. So it's pretty cool. Like we should definitely start like a Discord channel for Raads or something. Yeah.
Bring all the weirdos in. It's so funny because every one of those Raad actually DM'd me later on and we connected. Like, oh, that's actually
you can't not.
Only
right?
kind of weird thing that happens on Twitter. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like 23andMe, but just names, like weird names, and you just can all just connect and see them on a map and stuff.
Yeah, find your 5th cousin also named Raad, probably in Estonia or something.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, Raad. I really appreciate you hopping on. Obviously, we have lots to talk about. I think there's a couple of reasons why I was really particularly excited about this episode. A good place to start is maybe where we got both of our names. So I'd love to know a little bit about how you grew up. What was that like for you, having that name, particularly around the time you grew up? So let's start there and go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I was born in 1987 in Queens, New York, in Elmhurst Hospital. And my parents immigrated around that time to New York City in Queens and had me there. We grew up in a 2-bedroom house with like 7 other family members. And my dad ended up leaving his job in Bangladesh to follow the American dream, give me and eventually my sister a sort of better life. He used to work as an airline stewardess for Biman Airlines. That's where he met my mom. And I think at that time, like flight attendants made a boatload of money, or just like a good chunk for somebody that didn't really graduate high school. And he left that job to moved to the US and started from scratch and ended up doing a lot of different odd jobs to make ends meet, deliver newspapers late at night. My mom stayed home with us, me and my younger sister. And it was a bit of a struggle for him to just leave everything behind and start again from scratch and come to this country without really a formal education or a clear path to how he's going to earn an income. So he ended up starting a moving company. So like literally moving people's furniture across New York and eventually across the US. predominantly within the Bangladeshi community. He ran some ads in like the local newspaper there. But it was grueling. It was really hard work. It didn't pay that much, but he would work 12, 13-hour days. Moving is no joke. I remember, I mean, even recently I moved like just like a year ago, and I was just like, I kind of did it myself, like with some help. I was like, I never want to, like, I purposely don't want to move because of the process of moving. So I have so much respect for him, because for somebody to do that day in and day out is kind of insane. So at a very early age, I witnessed a lot of my father doing that, and it was ingrained in me to get a good education, don't do manual work, like have a stable income and all that stuff. So it was a struggle, but eventually we moved out of that house and we got a bigger house, and we moved around a lot. I think that was like one thing. Every 2-3 years, we bounced from place to place. I can't really remember exactly why, but it was always eventually like something related to either his job or something else. So a lot of starting over as a kid, like being the new kid every 2 to 3 years. So I never had really too many roots or stable place growing up. I was always a little bit of like an outsider coming in. But eventually my dad saved up enough money and moved us to Long Island when I was in middle school. And that's where I probably spent the most amount of time before going off to college.
Did you move house to house in the same neighborhood?
Yeah, it was predominantly around Queens that we moved around. And I think it was like, okay, we started in this like 2-bedroom house with another family, and then we got like a 1-bedroom house for ourselves, and then eventually a 2nd-bedroom apartment so that me and my sister could have our own room, and then just worked our way up. Really, I think that's why we bounced around a lot. But in that process, I remember from kindergarten to 2nd grade, I went to a Catholic school, private Catholic school, even though I was raised to be Muslim. But my parents didn't want to send me to the public school because they were just like, oh my God, like he's going to just like do a bunch of drugs and get tattoos and vandalize things. So I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 2nd grade. And then 3rd grade to 4th grade, I went to a private Muslim school. So very confused. And then like 5th grade, I then ended up finally going back to public school, but it was a good one. I think it was again somewhere in like Kew Gardens. And then 6th grade onward till high school graduation, I moved to Long Island, so away from Queens. And that was to my dad, that was like the ultimate, like, we've made it. We got the house. We're in suburbia. And then that's when all the teenage angst came out, like all the pop punk songs about like getting away from suburbia. I was just like, I was living it. I was just like, screw the white picket fence. Like, we started writing a bunch of songs and skateboarded a lot and just kind of fell into that culture a little bit. But I don't know. I was always
So funny because initially he's going to go to public Catholic school because we don't want Rod to get in trouble. And then they went to the suburbia and you're like, fuck this. Why am I here?
Yeah. Yeah. I was always just finding like, it was almost just kind of like anything that remotely felt like the normal path, quote unquote, that everyone else was doing. I would just always just bounce the other way. And I think luckily society almost rewards you for doing those opposite sort of things, because a lot of people don't go down that path. But it was always like a rebellious thing in me. I mean, that mixed with just a super strict religious Muslim household where I wasn't allowed to really use the internet growing up, even though like now like my life's work is basically on the internet. I found my wife on a dating app. I like use the internet almost every single day to communicate with all of our workers and everyone on the team. But there was just a lot of like restraint, and it's understandably so, right? Like when you're coming into this country around the time period of like when broadband internet came out, and like just the culture and cable TV and like pornography and magazines and like all of this just probably just overwhelmed the crap out of my dad and my mom. And I understand why like the reaction was just like, okay, we must protect him and like keep him away from all these things. But it was almost kind of like the more they kept me away from something, the more I did it, right? Like I wasn't allowed to we had a computer obviously for school and all that stuff, but it was like locked up in the basement. So like I would, growing up, this is like in Long Island, I would like wake up in the middle of the night, like sneak downstairs, like go on the computer, use AIM, chat with a bunch of people, like think of some business ideas, help create websites for other people, and then like go back to sleep at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I mean, even to this day, I don't know, maybe that made me like a night owl because I sleep pretty late, but it was interesting.
So what was it like Until you hit suburbia and you hit your sort of, as you said, angsty stage, how did you identify and define yourself at that time? Did you feel like you were an American, a Muslim, like somewhere in between, didn't even care? What was it?
I definitely identified more as an American. I don't know. I like music to me is a very spiritual thing. I mean, even now, like I pretty much listen to the same albums and same songs by like Bad Religion and No Effects that I listened to when I was in like high school, and I do that like when I go for a run today. So I didn't really identify a lot with like other people, like family, and I didn't have too many friends even in high school and middle school. So it was like it was songs and music and bands and skateboarders and things that I consumed that I really resonated with because they were also like a little bit of the outsiders and they were doing their own thing and they were having fun and there was tons of freedom and there was a creativity process mixed into that. So I just absorbed myself in all of that. And again, like when I couldn't really use the internet and I wasn't really allowed to watch TV, one of the only things I could do is like listen to the radio and listen to like, I remember like K Rock was like the main radio station back then. They used to play a lot of the alternative rock music. So I would just go in my room and quietly just listen to those songs. Eventually, my dad did get me a guitar, electric guitar. So I would like listen to all these songs and I would try to play it. And I spent a lot of my adolescent years around that sort of age period when I was like in middle school and high school, just like listening to songs and playing it on guitar and writing lots of music and kind of in isolation a little bit because I wasn't able to really go out. I didn't drink because for other reasons, like along with not being able to go out at night, I had this like neurological issue growing up where I would get like seizures and then I was just kind of told that like if I drank a lot, I would get it. So that freaked out my parents. So they would never like it was always just like you can't ever have a sip of beer. Like now it's not true. I drink and everything is fine, but like just lots of it was fear, right? So I don't know. Whenever it's like sometimes when I find myself kind of contained like that, a lot of beautiful, amazing things come out of that. But it's mixed with a lot of like angst and anger and certain energies that are bottled up, and I'm able to channel it through other things, which whether it was like skateboarding or writing punk rock songs or playing the drums or whatever. I mainly played guitar. There was always an outlet. There was always a channel, which I was really grateful for. And I think even to this day, I kind of carry some of that with me in whatever I do. It's like, it's a different medium. It's like it's a startup, but it's still very similar in many ways to like creating something that I thought of creating when I was like 16, 17. It's just a different platform to do it. I'm still telling my story. I'm still breaking down walls, but it's just done in a different way.
There's so much of what you said really resonates with me. Regarding startups, I tweeted a couple of weeks ago. I think all startups and founders start off as artists because you're wrestling with ambiguity. Creation is all about how do you wrestle with ambiguity, the self-doubt and all the stuff that comes with building, creating anything. You become a scientist later on because once a startup matures, you have a repeatability, you like product market fit. But until then, you're just like, it's all uncertain. You don't know. You can like tweak and find your ways. But the other thing that I want to reflect on really quickly is, so I grew up in Saudi Arabia, actually. So I was born in Bangladesh, grew up in Saudi Arabia for 14 years till I was about 16 years old. In 2000, we moved back to Bangladesh and then 9/11 happened, of course.
Yeah.
And in Saudi, you obviously at that time, like if you, and my parents were migrant workers, so we didn't really have much money to go around. We very like lower middle class upbringing. You find your little joys, but like no drugs. I know there's drugs behind closed doors if you're a rich person, but like none of the stuff that were like, if you find rebellion, you're going to channel it through. And music ended up being the only solace that I had for my anger and stuff like that. And when I moved back to Bangladesh at 16, all of a sudden, not even smoking to having this entire world of insanity, like hard drugs, music. Like I remember going to the first time into a music store in Bangladesh. It was like Kid in the Candy Store. Everything was pirated, of course, and the cover was printed with that jet printer, dot printer, that shit, you know.
Yeah.
But like I remember first time seeing like this CD, and I picked it up, and it's like this writing that looked like calligraphy. It was Lateralus by Tool.
Yeah.
First time I ever heard that album, and it
Mm.
changed my life forever. I think that was, if I was gonna say that one of the seminal moments that like saved me was finding
Mhm.
that album. And so when you're talking about like You spend hours and hours with music because you can't go out, so you go inwards.
Yeah.
And I think that's had a profound effect on how I see the world now and learning how to go inwards. And I'm really curious to hear about that journey, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I think relationship to music is something that I'd state probably the only thing that I've done consistently my entire life, which is have some relationship to art.
Yeah, I mean, it's a form of meditation. I didn't really look at that as meditation. I think now like people view it as like it needs to be this thing on the Calm app, and there's peaceful waterfall music playing in the background, and you sit still for 10 minutes and you meditate. It's like that's not exactly what meditation is. Meditation is just, it can be anything. It can be drawing something, it can be listening to music, it can be going for a walk. Like as long as you're able to like remove your thoughts from the moment you're meditating, right? That's ultimately like, I mean, even for you, like similar, like 9/11 was absolutely horrible for me. I was already like this outsider punk rock kid in high school that like didn't have that many friends and was always kind of like a little bit of like a weirdo doing weird things. And then when that happened, it was almost just kind of like, okay, the spotlight was like on me. And I mean, just people just said some awful things. And I don't hold it to them today. I mean, it's just, I think like being a Muslim American in high school, when that happens with how high schoolers are, like that was just a crappy time. And again, when I would skateboard, or when I would listen to music, when I would make art or whatever, I was able to find that separation between this self, this ego, this constant thinking, the thoughts, that the repetition of what someone said. I was able to turn it off. And I love that feeling. And I want to stay in that feeling as long as possible on most days, even today. But you know, I don't have any regrets to it. I don't like hold anything against anybody. I think that it's made me the person that I am today. And there's a lot of, I think just growing up as like a first gen immigrant, I did have this like sort of attitude where I just like blamed my parents for so many things, blamed like just all the rules and strictness in the household growing up, and all these like kids that were just like assholes. And I'm just kind of like, at some point I just let all that go, right? All of that baggage is like, it's just memories. It's just thoughts. It's just, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. So it was interesting. Yes. 9/11 was a very interesting time period to be brown in America. I mean, not even Muslim. It's just like anyone that's brown. I think like if you had a freaking turban, you were like, I think even targeted even more, but which absolutely makes no sense that we know that now. But
Well, it's interesting because I also was 16. I remember distinctly, and I'm sure it's for the same for a lot of people. Is like I remember distinctly the moment where I walked into my apartment. My dad and mom were glued to the TV, and 9/11 happened, and I saw the second plane go in. But that sort of like feeling reverberated, even though I was in the U.S. I decided actually not to go to the U.S. for school because of that moment. Both my brother and sister went to the U.S., got awesome scholarships, are doing really well. But I said, fuck that. Because my legal first name is actually Hussein. And I'm like, all right, guy with my name, my color, my religion, I don't want to go there. So it's really interesting the effect it's had. But I want to switch gears a little bit because I think, so there was a comment and I forgot, but it's on your blog. Let me just pull that up really quickly because I found it really interesting as a segue to the next part of the conversation, which is passionately curious, compulsively minimalist. I like making old things easier and new things possible. When did and how did like your first venture come around? My Facebook cover photo or FB cover photo.
yeah. So that was in my second year of law school. So again, I got into law school and I finished my first year. I did really well, and then again had that gut feeling like, oh my God, it's happening again. I'm back in the I'm back in the line doing the same thing as everybody else. And I remember around that time, this is gonna sound kind of cheesy, but like I watched the movie The Social Network, and it just blew my mind. Like I remember I watched it with like my ex-girlfriend at the time, and we both got out of the movie theater, and I was just like, oh my God. Like I was literally like I was literally almost like shaking in terms of like the impact that it had on me, that was actually possible. And to her, she was just like, yeah, it was all right. I thought it was like a bunch of dialogue. I was like, did you not see the same movie that I saw? Like it was just it just I've always thought about it, but to actually be able to kind of like see the Facebook story unfold in the way they did, even though obviously some parts they exaggerated and it was like it was a movie, it was dramatized. But the essence, the core of it, that somebody with a laptop and an internet connection can like build something awesome on the internet and like affect so many lives, and you can create an impact, and you don't need permission to do that. And I just went home that day and was just like, I'm going to build something. It just happened to be an app in the Facebook App Store. That wasn't that clear to me at that time. I knew I wanted to build something. So after watching that movie, and I read a bunch of books on, not a bunch, there was actually one book in particular, another cheesy title. It was called Millionaire Fastlane, but it was one of the few books that actually broke down how wealthy people actually get wealthy. And it's not by renting out your time. It's by creating something once and being able to like distribute that in an unlimited amount of ways with a zero cost of replication. And also, yes, owning assets. So it can be something like a music CD where you record an album, you make it once, and then the MP3s or the CDs can just be duplicated for like 2 pennies or whatever it costs for the bandwidth to be accessible to everybody, but you can still charge that like $9.99 for it. And I kind of understood that concept for how internet companies work, and building this website once, writing this code once, and having the entire world that has internet connection to access this, whatever, this store almost that's open 24/7, that can have as many people as possible in it, that can just grow and scale. So the idea for the Facebook App Store, after I had that experience with the movie and read these books, and I was like, okay, I need to do something. I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't know. Like it's almost like the universe just did its own thing, and I ended up watching this video on F8. That's, I think, Facebook's annual like developer conference, and they were at the time. This was like I forgot, like 2010 or 2011 or something like that. They were just like, hey, we're going to completely revamp the Facebook profile, and we're going to put this gigantic cover photo on top of it. Now every social network has like a cover photo. By that time, Facebook was one of the first ones to do it. And I was like, like that's a cool idea. Like I could probably see some people like changing that up or customizing it and adding it. Like I viewed it like kind of like a desktop wallpaper kind of thing. And I was like, okay, like wouldn't it be kind of neat to have like an app where you can browse through all these different cover photos perfectly sized to that whatever banner image, and some of them be like inspirational quotes or like Justin Bieber cover photos or like food photos or whatever. And you can, with one click, automatically change it on your Facebook profile and express yourself in a certain way. So I did that. I basically found this developer based in China, paid him like $300 to write like their source code, submitted it to the Facebook App Store, which at the time was like super new. Like I think we were like one of the first ones even live in the Facebook App Store. I don't think it exists anymore because of all this stuff that happened where people took advantage of the platform. But I spent pretty much most of my second and third year of law school literally downloading images off the internet, cropping them to be the banner size and uploading it on my site, and just during class, after class, early in the mornings, just like how many photos can I basically upload? And it was like, it was just, I mean, it was like a digital sweatshop factory of one person trying to upload these things. But eventually I had like thousands of them up there, and people accessed them. And as soon as they were able to click a button, it would change it. And then the viral component was it would post it on their Facebook profile that you used this app for it. So all of their friends then saw it. So eventually it snowballed to at its peak, it was getting about 30 million hits a month. And I read a book on AdSense, or some article on it, of how AdSense and banner ads work. So I threw a banner ad on there, and to my surprise, it was I think at its peak was making like $250K a year through ad clicks while I was in law school still, and had that second epiphany where I just like, all right, like this is what the fuck I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like I'm not interviewing for any more law firms. Like the people that were interviewing me were literally making less money. Like they were going to offer me less money and ask me to work more hours than just like kind of waking up and uploading a couple of images. So that was the other sort of profound epiphany experience, and I wanted to do it bigger, and that eventually segued into law trades.
That's fucking insane, man. Like your first one, you came out of watching a movie, you're like, all right, time to pay attention to Facebook, and you did this thing. That's insane. How did your parents feel about that?
Mom loved it. I told him, I told my mom, she just couldn't believe, like, she opened up the laptop and show her like the AdWords dashboard and was just like, this was how much money I made in one day. And she's just like, I think her first reaction was just like, how is that possible? Did you not have to go somewhere to do that? Like, that happened while you slept? And I was just like, yeah, it happened while I was sleeping. Like, I just made like $7,000. And at first she didn't get it, but my mom was definitely more of the artistic, supportive person that was just like, go do your music, go do your art. And my dad was like the pragmatic, get the degree, get the salary sort of thing. So I told my mom about it. My dad, I can't remember, honestly. I don't think so. So I think I was just like still in this weird state with him because this kind of led into me not taking the bar examination. I think I remember telling him that in like my third year, and he got really upset about that. So I think that if I piled on this like Facebook app website thing, that would have probably made the situation a lot worse. But he knows about it now, but like it just didn't make sense to him. It was very hard to comprehend that this was actually possible and that this could be actually sustainable. In the end, there was a bunch of other competitors that came out and like completely destroyed me and like outranked me on SEO and built a better app. And that was a little bit of like the learning lesson with that, where it's just like, you can't just expect to build something and leave it as it is. You need to constantly tinker with it. You need to constantly make it better. You need to hire a team around it. I didn't do any of that. But I made enough money to save up to eventually pursue other things. And so it played its part.
Well, as a life lesson, I mean, that's pretty incredible, right? I mean, I can only imagine. You said this is what I'm fucking gonna do with my life, right? I want to talk about Law Trades, how you came across that, what this company is to you. Tell us a little bit about what Law Trades is, and then more interestingly, this wild sort of fundraising journey that you've spoken about on Twitter. I really enjoyed reading that thread, particularly around like coming back from the absolute brink of death and now being on your way, like launching, like you guys are doing really well on an hour basis. So yeah, what is Law Trades? What has it been last few years?
Yeah, so Law Trades is essentially a marketplace for legal services. So we connect companies to a network of vetted legal freelancers, and we enable them to work together, pay each other, and just have a collaborative relationship on the internet. The way that it started is I got the idea from it, unsurprisingly, while I was in law school. And I wanted to start my own practice. I didn't want to go and work for somebody else. And when I looked around for any sort of platform remotely close to like what Shopify did for e-commerce sellers, I couldn't find anything that did what they did, but for delivering professional services online. There were other marketplaces at the time, like Upwork and Fiverr, but they catered more towards like one-off projects and designers and developers, but not like legal services, which I knew from like interning at different law firms prior to law school and during law school and just being in the space. I knew it needed to be something super nuanced for that industry. So I set out to build it as like a side project. The initial idea for Law Trades was like find a local lawyer in your neighborhood using an appointment booking tool. So very influenced by, I don't know if you're familiar with the website ZocDoc, but it allows you to book appointments with doctors and dentists online. And they were at the time like one of the big breakout startups out in New York City. So I was like, okay, I'm going to build a ZocDoc for lawyers. And you go onto this website, you punch in your zip code and you see a list of available lawyers. The lawyers will sync their calendar so you could see their real-time availabilities. You click a button and the lawyer will call you at that time. Very simple. And that was like worst case, if I don't get any users off of this, I'll just use it myself and be the futuristic law firm of one or whatever. Just doing something like that was already so far beyond every other like legal website. If you actually go to most big law firm websites, there's not even a way to contact them. And all the smaller ones, like their interface and
started dogfooding your service before anybody else, basically.
Yeah. What would I want? It's like at the base level, an easier way to capture clients in order for me to convert them. So we ended up starting off as like a subscription-based services and went basically door to door, literally door to door with a Square reader, convincing lawyers that we found on Yelp to sign up for $300 a year. I have no idea why we set the price to $300 a year. It seemed like a decent amount of money at the time. I eventually recruited my co-founder, like maybe like a year after I tinkered with this as a side project, and some lawyers were kind of interested in signing up. We went to undergrad together, and he was in law school at the time. He was 1 year behind from me. So like around the time when I was graduating, he was still in law school. But, he had a car. So I thought like, okay, well, if you have a car, then we can expand our target audience, our target market. We can drive to Long Island and convince people there that they should use our services. And it literally was that. We would meet lawyers in coffee shops. We'd go into their office. We'd do all this convincing to just be like, hey, sign up for the service. And a lot of them did. A lot of them did. And I think in those early days, it really taught us how important it is to just kind of like go the extra mile for your customers to really stand out, even though we had like a subpar product and it it didn't do a lot of the promises we said that it would do. Like they loved the appointment booking tool function, but really what they wanted was like customer demand. They wanted leads. And as like a tiny company that didn't have really an advertising budget or had the runway to do like SEO, which takes like months and months because we were late to the game, that model didn't really work out. So, and on top of that, we were targeting every single type of lawyer. So divorce lawyers, personal injury lawyers, business lawyers, it was just too much for us to handle. So we eventually then pivoted the business to being more of a B2B marketplace focused on small businesses and startups. We're like, okay, that's more refined. We're going to only be working with business lawyers. It's going to be corporate work. So they're transactionals. We can turn them into like flat fee projects. And we're going to create this Amazon-like experience of buying legal services where you go in, you say what you want, you purchase it for $500. The lawyer does the work and you get it delivered like easy, seamless, whatever. At the time sounded like an amazing idea. We got some traction off of it. That eventually allowed us to get into 500 startups. That was the accelerator program. They put like 125K, I think, into the company. Prior to that, I convinced my college friends to put in a little bit of money, like my college roommate and two other folks that like was like pre-seed before that at an insanely low, I think like $2.75 million valuation or something like that. Now it's like the YC floor price, like 30 million cap with like a deck and a landing page or whatever. But we raised from family and friends, and then we got into 500 startups, and then we eventually raised a proper seed round so Draper Associates led our seed round. So Tim Draper, really great investors, invested in Tesla, SpaceX, Robinhood. And we were just like, we were over the moon. We were just like, oh my God, like we fucking did it. We made it. We're done. The hard work is done. Little do we know about this little thing called the unit economics and financial statements and profitability. We had a good market segment, but the problem was our users were startups that use this on a very one-off way. And 90% of startups or something like that go out of business after their first year. So it was like building a sandcastle by the shore every single month. We'd build it up, build it up, build it up. And then the wave would come and just wash it all over. Then we had to start our revenue from scratch, from zero. So it was insanely difficult business to profitably grow. So on top of that, this kind of ties into fundraising where a competitor came out, raised $75 million. Every single investor we were talking with for our Series A pretty much like ghosted us. And we had no choice but to make like a major pivot to the business if we wanted to survive. Right. And I wasn't ready to give up. I was just like, there has to be another way, even though like our bank account was getting low, our customers were churning. We raised a bridge round, but our backs were really against the wall. And around that time, we figured out that there was a better customer segment out there, particularly high tech companies that had an actual legal department, because as these tech companies grew and scaled like crazy pre-IPO and recently gone public, every single department was growing like crazy except for their legal department that still remained like a couple of people trying to handle everything. So we found one of those users using the app every single day, and we gave him a call and we're just like, hey, like, what do you do? Why are you using the app so much? And he was like, well, I'm a general counsel and I like this lawyer that I'm working with. Like, get rid of the create a project button and let me hire them every month and I'll pay you a subscription for that. And like our minds were blown. We're just like, what the hell is a general counsel and why is he using us? Like, why is he just like using us like so regularly? So that was again, another sort of light bulb moment went off that like, okay, like that's the sustainable, profitable, repeatable customer segment that like we need to go after. And we again had to start from scratch, rebuilt the platform from the ground up. started with like literally a Google spreadsheet, built out a new sort of network of lawyers that were more attuned to that customer base, and grew the company from, I think, literally on the brink of bankruptcy just a couple of years ago to, I think this month we did around like 850K in monthly revenues, and eventually led to our Series A. That was a couple of months ago.
That's just absolutely incredible. It reminds me of your first experience and how you brought it all back, and to see your success right now is truly inspirational. I am curious about how did you, going back to how we started the conversation, like being able to go inwards, listen to that voice and understand, separate yourself from the ego and the persona of a successful entrepreneur, to going inside and understanding and navigating the challenging journey that I imagine you had, right? During the worst times. And now, like, you're past that valley of death and like you're on your way, hopefully. And then, of course, you and I talked a little bit about your mental health journey, your work with ketamine, particularly in the last year or so. I don't remember when you started, but how did that thread of your life come about? Was it around the same time? How do you reflect on that now? And what's been your mental health journey in that way with ketamine?
So I started experimenting with ketamine, I want to say, I think like around like 2020 or so. I've been doing therapy before that. And I think during like the startup pivot that we went through and that whole sort of experience, I knew that I needed to be mentally resilient. I just needed to find the tools for how that was possible. So I got deep into some of the spiritual books at the time around what mindfulness was, what is ego, what is self. So I had baseline understanding that I'm just like, honestly, we're going through a tough time, but I am my worst enemy right now. My mind is my worst enemy right now. Like, I'm fighting not only for my company, but I'm also fighting myself. So what I could control was certain parts of the company through pivots and different product iterations. But what was 100% in my control was my mind, myself, my thoughts. So I had that early sort of insight. And I remember even in the early days of Law Trades, like me and my co-founder, we would go outside and we would smoke a cigarette and he would just be panicking, freaking out. And I'm just like, dude, don't worry. It's going to be fine. It's all going to be good. Even if I didn't like totally believe that at the time, I was just like, if I can just speak these words and change this person's mind, like maybe I could just change my mind too. It was like really weird like that. Like it wasn't like super scientific or anything. I was just like, I'm just going to choose to think that everything will be okay. Just like how I can choose to think that everything's going to go to shit. So I did therapy. I thought that was a really good sort of first step. But what prompted me to that was actually less about the startup, but I was going through a bad breakup with my ex-girlfriend at the time. And it would just spending so much time at the startup and not really contributing much to the relationship. And she actually prompted me to go see a therapist. And this was like, I think in 2009, no, even before that, I want to say like 2017-ish. So I'd still see the same person for a couple of years. And I think that's been like a really beautiful relationship because she's seen all the ups and downs, and to just have that relationship compound over the years and for someone to really get to know me, that's like an invaluable relationship and thing that I picked up on. The ketamine I started, I think around 2020 or so. I was looking for something more. I think I had like a basic understanding of cognitive behavior therapy and why that works. And I just wanted to go deeper in my mind, or lack of mind for that matter. And in 2020 is when I actually experienced two really important deaths in my life. So the first one was my mom passing away suddenly, unexpectedly. And the second one was one of my close friends. His name was Fahim Saleh, who was another Bangladeshi entrepreneur who kind of like, yeah, Gojek. He did prank. So he lived in New York City. So we would like, back in the day, we would hang out a lot. We would party a lot. And he, at that time, he's kind of he's made it at that point. Like, and I would just be like, all right, wherever you go out, I'm coming with you. Like, your bottle's on you pretty much. But I learned a lot from him, like in a lot of the early days when I had the idea for like the Facebook App Store and all of that. He had started this website called Prankdal, and he would always, like, whenever I'd ask him questions, he would always show me like what was happening behind the scenes. So when both of them passed away, I knew that I needed to try something else because I was in a really, really dark place at that time. And ironically, my startup was actually going through the upward trajectory around 2020. Like we doubled our revenues during COVID, and we're finally making this turn to getting out of the rut that we were in. But my personal life was pretty much falling apart. I was really, really close to my mom. I wasn't that close to my dad, but I was really, really close to her. And she just basically went on this trip to Bangladesh for like a family reunion and pretty much had this like aneurysm and just died like just like that. So around this time, there was actually, and this is how it's weird how all this is connected. I was writing this newsletter that I think you briefly brought up called Space Cult, where I was just like, I'm just gonna write about random shit that like is non-marketing or startup related. It's just like things that I just want to just kind of get out there from my mind into the world. Whoever wants to subscribe can subscribe. Whoever doesn't, I don't really care. But there was a founder friend in there, and he started this company called Mindbloom, which does these ketamine therapy things. And it's a service, and you can basically go onto their website, take an assessment, and then they have like a guided therapist person. They send you dosages, and it's a really cool sort of experience. You get like headphones and get to zone out and all of that. He did a legal tech startup before that. So like we kind of like connected that way. And I was like, all right, this sounds cool. Like I trust this guy. I didn't really know too much about ketamine before. It's legal, so that's good. And I just like, I tried it out, and I thought that it gave me what I was looking for at that time, which is creating some space between my mind and my body and what I was thinking. And it wasn't like a crazy long multi-hour trip or anything. I think it lasts usually like 45 minutes to an hour or something. But just that hour was like, sometimes I've done a couple of sessions, just the perspective that I needed when I was reaching that boiling point of like my mind just constantly just going on its own and running and running and running and running. So I found those sessions profoundly helpful to giving me that space to actually understand what was happening without the emotional element attached to it. And it's a super cool service because you like journal afterwards, you write your thoughts. There's like an integration person that you can like chat through. So it was profound, to say the least. I've never really experienced something like that before. And I feel like I got what I needed from it.
Do you feel like it's something you're going to try again, or do you feel like that was a chapter, you learned what you wanted from it, and so you're moving on?
So I've done quite a few sessions of it over the years. And I think for where I am now, I've got what I needed from it, where what I'm focusing more on now is how can I replicate almost like the feeling that I got from ketamine on my own. It again comes back to a little bit the beginning of the story, where I don't ever want to be dependent on any one thing. I think that it's a profound way to give you that peek into what is possible. And I think that's super powerful. I think that in the society we live in today, it's really hard to find any kind of resource that lets you truly unplug in that way and get some mental clarity for yourself, to think for yourself. Who knows if I treat it as something that like, if there is another catastrophic event where I need to like, it's like that break in case of emergency thing for me, where like it's there if I do ever need it. It's not, as far as I know, it's not addictive. It's actually can be quite an exhaustive experience. So it's not like really a recreational sort of thing. You do put in the work. You do have to allocate a couple of hours of your day to do it. But I knew that it's something that I needed to work on. And this is kind of part of that obsessive personality bit, where I was just like, I need to reprogram my brain almost. And I treated it in that way. So yeah, I thought it was great. I still have like my journals of that I write. And sometimes I'll like just read it, check it out, see the headspace that I was in at the time. And that's pretty cool as well. Yeah, it was cool.
I definitely agree with what you were saying. And I think the framing is definitely one that I really resonate with. Working pretty, because I'm in this weird world of SaaS, psychedelics, culture, and it's like, perhaps reflecting, it's refusing to not let any of these things go. Because, you grew up, you're like, okay, pick a side, pick a lane, whatever, right? I'm like, no, fuck that. Science and art to me makes sense. And psychedelics to me is like the convergence point of that. But the reason I bring that up is that we frequently speak about it in the space where George Harrison had a really good saying about this. Receive the message, hang up. These are tools. These are, unless you come from cultures and with deep indigenous sort of like heritage where even within them, these plant medicines, these tools were used in a context. It wasn't just the world we live in now. It's very, you want something, you get access to it, we use it and abuse it. it no longer serves as the tool. It becomes the thing, becomes the crutch. And I think
Yeah.
to your point is like, how do you use it, go inwards, but then try to replicate and go through that, walk through that door without it afterwards? To me, psychedelics is the key, not the door
Yeah.
itself. The door is the consciousness and a way to walk inwards. You spiral in to spiral out. So I really like the way you frame it. One last thing I want to touch on, and we're almost at time here, is you've had this very adventurous life with its ups and downs, with its pleasures and pain, right? You're also a tech entrepreneur, and I find that, why do you think tech entrepreneur, and at least from the world I'm seeing, we don't talk about mental health often enough? It's very challenging. It's challenging as it is, but it feels there's this all these little layers of baggage, right? Of course, for people like you and me, immigrant families, growing up person of color, all the politics that comes with that, mixed identities. But in technology itself, it has its own baggage. It feels like this sort of like very pernicious image of success that gets portrayed, where like being an entrepreneur isn't enough. Being uber successful, if you are not a billionaire nowadays, or your company's not making a unicorn, it's not worth doing it, right? So where do you think that comes from?
I think there's a couple of things at play there. I think number one, most people probably just view emotions as a sign of weakness, and talking about it openly might make you be perceived as a weaker CEO or a weaker founder. And part of the actor you have to play is a strong, successful person. And I totally get that. You need to be strong for your employees. You need to be strong and confident to raise money. You need to be confident to attract customers. But I think that sometimes we get lost in that character and overdo it and don't know when to turn that off. And we become inauthentic. I think partly Twitter is a little bit to blame. Twitter, Facebook, social media, where you perceive someone's world through just like the 280 characters or whatever, and you form a basis of who they are based off of that, even though like whatever you're tweeting is going to be the best stuff in your life. So I think it gives a very warped reality of what a human being actually is and what they experience. And then you then take that perception and embody that for yourself, which isn't really totally natural. It's actually quite artificial, but you convince yourself of that. And then I think the other piece of it is, yeah, like you said, right? It's like a lot of people are chasing that valuation or that whatever, that net worth or that press article. And I'm not going to lie, I played that game before at a certain point. I refuse to play that game now. I think I've learned enough over the years, and which only I could have learned through the direct experience of truly how meaningless and pointless that is, and how miserable it can like actually make you, and how it can it'll make you lose focus of the goal at hand, which is like helping people. That's why you start a company. You start a company to help people, not to get $1 billion valuation. That's like a byproduct of that. But we sometimes jump the gun a little bit and try to get to that part first and then think about helping people. But if you genuinely in your heart just want to help people, you view software and tools in the internet as just a way to help more people at scale instead of just doing it on a one-to-one basis on a street corner or something like that. So I think that, yeah, I think that it is that bit of this character that we have to play. And I think that people don't really spend enough time by themselves or in isolation, or like actually analyze those thoughts and just ask, do I really want to be chasing after that valuation? Do I really want to be raising more money right now? Or am I doing it because I saw somebody else do it? And it's like the idea of mimetic theory, right? We want what other people want or do. We just copy each other. We just look left and right. And if you and me could be like walking into a restaurant, and you might go in wanting to order a glass of wine, but then I order a glass of martini first, and then maybe you'll order that martini because you saw me ordering it, even though you wanted a glass of wine when you sort of first walked in. And it's like, and that happens at a scale that's way beyond what you drink. It becomes your life decisions. It becomes how you pick your partner. It becomes like where you live and what you do, right? So like so much of my life is sort of like I get drawn into that and I immediately like stop. And I think I did startups because it had this rebellious spirit to it that was very punk rock, that was very like, I'm doing my own thing and no one can tell me what to do. But at some point, I think now as the startup industry has matured, it became back to this sort of institutionally like vibe, like where like you have to raise from Andreessen Horowitz and you have to do a Series A in this way and you have to be valued at this amount. You have to write a Twitter thread. It's just like, no, you don't have to do anything at all. Not even a startup to begin with. But if you do a startup, do it in your own way. Do it from a place of purity, from a place of ultimate freedom, from a place of creativity. View it as like a blank canvas that you can paint over the years and leave that behind. And I think that idea, I think, gets lost and then we start forming a lot of this like dense, egoic sort of perspectives into why we do certain things. And I'm the first to admit I can get lost into that. But I think I'm back at this place where like it feels like just day one, even though it's been like a couple of years, where I'm going to do what I want to do, when I want to do, and however way I want to do it in my own terms. And nobody's going to fucking stop me. Like that's just the attitude that I have. And I'm going to keep it real and I'm going to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And not to sound too crazy, but like not be controlled by anyone or anything. So
Fuck yeah, brother. I was going to make a funny reference to a scene from Silicon Valley, but I think this is a good place to end it because I think that was really powerful. And I learned a lot, man. And your story is certainly inspirational. Like I said, for me, it's got a different kind of resonance to it. But all the best to you, man. Like I'm really, really happy hearing the journey you've gone through and the success you're finally finding. And whatever this takes you, I wish you all the best. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about this.
thanks, man. Super fun. Thanks for having me.
This podcast was brought to life with the help of Carolyn Tripp on art and design, Misha Ross on sound design, and Wilson Lin on editing. Thanks so much for listening to Minority Trip Report. I'm your host, Raad Siraj.